Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolowski, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
Welcome again. What a wonderful show we're going to have today. And I want to, first of all, thank a lovely boutique named Betty Ryder, where I am wearing this lovely, smashing, subtle colored shirt today. So thank you. This is a luxury brand boutique in Parks, in Preston Center in Dallas, Texas. And stop by. They've got incredibly beautiful clothes. Well, today, Brittany Underwood is my guest, and she's a young woman who, her life was absolutely transformed at age 19 when she and some friends decided they would just go somewhere overseas and teach, and they landed in Uganda. And I'm going to let Brittany tell that story because it's the most incredible story I've ever heard. But let me tell you just one other thing because she won't brag on herself. She now is the CEO and founder of the Akola Project and Akola Jewelry, and she's found so many ways to help women in crisis in this impoverished area of Uganda. Here's what I want to share with you. In 2017, Brittany was named among the world's top CEOs in Inc. magazine, the best person in the world by Yahoo in 2014, and was honored by Levi as one of 50 women around the world who have changed the political, the cultural, and the spiritual shape of the future. You talk about doing it right. Brittany, I'm just really grateful that you took the time to come over here and do this.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's amazing. I just want you to start with the story. Yeah. 19 years old.
Yep.
How did this all start?
Yeah, by accident, which is the best part of the Akola story. I promised 2 friends we'd have a summer adventure. I was a sophomore at SMU and thought we would, teach somewhere in the world. And they signed us up to be in Uganda.
How did they sign you up to Uganda?
It's funny because I tuned out of the conversation for a week and kind of patched back in. They said, "Oh, we're going to Uganda." And I said, whoa. First of all, where's Uganda? I didn't know where it was on the map. I didn't know it was in Africa. And it's embarrassing. I've spent 15 years there now and did not know where it was on the map. And second of all, I said, I thought when we were going to go teach somewhere in the world, we'd be in Europe or maybe Eastern Europe. But, in a remote village in Africa, that's not really how I was planning to spend my summer. So my friends literally, they dragged me over there. I tried every way to back out. And next thing I knew, I was in Uganda.
And when you got off the plane and you saw where you were, what were you feeling?
I think at that point in my life, I was really overwhelmed. I was a, entitled sorority girl at SMU. Like, this was not my jam to go to, third world countries and remote villages and spend the summer without, running water or electricity. That wasn't where my heart or my head was at the time. And I was completely overwhelmed.
What happened when you were overwhelmed and started getting into whatever you were there to do? What were you there to do?
Yeah, so we went to go teach in Western Uganda, and actually the school wasn't ready to receive us, which was a surprise to us.
Another story.
A whole nother story. So we ended up in Kampala, Uganda's capital city, before moving out to the west for 2 weeks. And during that time, we were going to different villages and getting to know the community. And I was sick. I was so sick. The first 2 weeks I was there. I was sick. I was tired. I've never witnessed extreme poverty. And I didn't know I didn't know how to process it. So I was kind of disengaged. So a local pastor we were working with at the time, I think he noticed I was struggling.
How could he not?
And he said, I want you to meet this amazing woman in our community. I think she'll inspire you. So I said, okay. And I followed him up this tiny dirt road to this little shack outside of Kampala. And it was there that I met a Ugandan woman named Sarah. And her story changed the rest of my life.
Was she just a woman, mom, teacher?
Yeah.
Who was Sarah?
She was, you would never know who she was because she's one of the many women in these communities in Uganda who sort of behind the scenes sacrificed everything she had to care for others. In her case, she felt that God had called her to take care of street kids. So she had no way to provide for them. Her husband worked in the city and would every weekend come back with this tiny bit of money that he would leave for her and her daughter, enough, for them to maybe have, rice and beans for the week, maybe chicken once, just one protein. Beans. And unbeknownst to him, when he was gone, she would open up her doors to orphan children, and they would wander into her home, roll out these tiny bamboo mats that she had, and huddled together to keep warm, and she went hungry and her daughter went hungry to feed these kids with that tiny bit of money. And so it just was one of those situations where, here I was, a college student who was spoiled and selfish and hadn't done anything for anyone my whole life, meeting a woman who literally went hungry so others could live. And it completely shook me out of my complacency.
Lands. Do you have a picture of her?
I do. I have a lot of pictures of Sarah over the years. What's funny is she was 22, 23 years old at the time. I was 19. So we were almost the same age, just lived life in such a fundamentally, different way. Her whole life was about others, and my whole life was about me. It was this crazy moment. And I think this doesn't always happen in every journey, but everything came out of that moment. Everything changed that day. And, I changed gradually, but the shift happened when I met Sarah. And I thought, what can I do to help?
Sarah and the kids.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you were crying and tearing and feeling, like you said, overwhelmed and what have. So then how did that progress to the next step?
Well, slowly, because I think, at the time I just thought, I had $20 in my pocket, gave it to her and said, I'll pray for you, I'll pray for these kids and that they have food. And she shared these stories with me about how, they would go sort of to the brink of starvation and beans would just show up. They'd pray and beans would show up at their door. And I just thought, gosh, I'll pray that keeps on happening. There are these kids who, they're on the brink of starvation.
And how old are these kids, these street kids?
They were, 4 to 10
and
at the time.
Didn't have parents?
Well, in Uganda, orphans are defined in basically in the way where parents can't take care of them. So some of them may have had parents. Their parents could not, could not give them shelter, could not give them food. Others had lost both of their parents. Just a situation where they had no one to care for them, so they were on the streets. And so, I just said, gosh, I just like most people do, I think when they see a need like that, like, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you, and I hope all goes well. And I thought it would end there, and it didn't. The rest of the summer, we moved to Western Uganda. I only met Sarah for 10 minutes. Actually formed relationships with other women, in the place that I actually worked for the rest of the summer that were sort of doing the same thing and had the same heart and passion, but I could not stop thinking about Sarah and her kids. And it just was a burden. It wasn't even compassion at the time because I don't think I had a lot of compassion in me. I just was overwhelmed and wanted to do something to help and just felt like I had to, and so that grew and grew. I left Uganda for the summer and I went back to SMU and went to study abroad in Italy, which is quite different than being in a remote village in Uganda. And I actually broke my leg 3 weeks into the trip. Ended up in a hospital bed in Atlanta, could not move, could not walk. I had a wheelchair, walker, cane, you name it, for 6 months to repair my hip. And I was just laid out, and all I could think about was this woman. And so finally it just drove me crazy. So I thought I've got to got to do something. So I called a man in the middle of the night. I didn't remember the time difference. It was 3 a.m, I think, his time, that we had worked with the summer before. And he was actually training the pastor that took me to meet Sarah. And so I called him up and said, I don't know if you remember me. And I was thinking, I hope he doesn't, because I was not one of the bright lights on that trip, at that point. And he did remember me. And I said, I met this woman in this village, and I want to help in some way. Maybe I could send over some money to make sure that they have food. What can I do? And I'll never forget, he started crying. His voice cracked on the phone, and he said, I've been praying with this pastor for 3 years that someone would come help this woman and her kids. And strangely enough, several weeks after you met her, another couple came through the village and met Sarah, and they started a sponsorship program for Sarah and her kids. And I thought, oh, hallelujah, they're taken care of. I don't have to feel bad anymore. I can go on with my life. And then he said, but, the big but that changed everything. But what they really need is a home. And I thought, well, that's great. I don't know what you want me to do. I'm 20 years old.
I'm still in college.
I'll pray they get a home. I don't know. And he said, well, I think you should think about it. They really need a home. The kids are getting malaria. They're, sick because they're sleeping on the ground, and they need beds and, a place to stay. And so I said, okay, and called him back 3 months later and said, what would it take to build a home for Sarah and her kids?
How much money would it take?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how much money did it take?
A lot more than we thought. Of course, being 20 years old, just highly idealistic, and thought, well, this initial idea of building a home for Sarah and her kids seemed manageable. Probably $10,000 project to build a small home and care for 24 kids. But I flew to Uganda a couple months later. I had a break from school, and thought, I was a journalism major at the time, and thought if someone else could just see the story, if they could hear what I heard and see the pictures of the kids, like surely they'd be willing to help. And so if I could film a video, I knew how to do that.
Great
as a journalism
idea.
major. And, other people could hear the story, and maybe I could raise $10,000 to, build this home. And so I went over there. And anytime you do work in rural communities in East Africa, the whole community is involved. It's not just who you're partnering with. It's, the elders and the LC chairs and the leadership from the village. And you end up in these sort of ceremonies where everyone has an opinion, everyone's involved. And, I'm 20 years old trying to shoot this video. And next thing I know, I'm part of this village council. And, I'll never forget, there was an older man, and he was sort of mad. I thought, well, why is he mad? I'm trying to help and build this home for these kids. And he said, look around. And I did. And he said, what do you see? And, I said, well, a lot of shacks. I see a slum. He was like, what else do you see? I said, children. He goes, yeah, there's a lot more children than these 24 children who need a home. And at that time, we had, started working on buying this piece of land to build this, what was this tiny house on. And he said, on that same plot of land, you could build an orphanage for every kid in this community who needs a home, and no kids would be on the street. So I literally returned from Uganda with truly plans for an orphanage on a napkin at Fuel X. We went to this gas station and kind of, dreamed about what this building would look like, and came home and told my parents I was building a orphanage in Uganda.
As simple as that.
So the plan,
it happens.
The plan went from this, tiny home to this $1 million project to build a 3-story orphanage for 200 kids in Kampala. So it grew really fast.
This is just, I don't know about you listening and watching, but this is, all right, so incredible is what I was going to say. So from that, you obviously built it.
We built it, yeah. So started raising the money, the video. At that time we just had, these DVDs, and, we had people come to our fundraisers, and they were so moved by the story, they would pick up a stack of DVDs and just send them to their friends, and we were getting checks in the mail from people I had never met. I realized I had to start a nonprofit to collect donations, which is new 20? To me. I'm 20. I don't
20.
know how to do this. And so I marched in, this is the best part of the story, into the nonprofit department of SMU, and knocked on a amazing woman, Maria Dixon Hall, who teaches race relations and nonprofit at SMU, and walked in and said, I'm building this orphanage in Africa, and I thought you could help. I want to sign up for all your classes. And she looks back. She's on our board now, and she was on our board in the past. And she was like, this is my worst nightmare. This white sorority girl, going to save Africa. She was like, oh, man, Lord, what
Did
are you
she
doing?
believe you?
I think she just was like, oh, gosh, this is...
What do I do with this
what do I do with
20-year-old?
this girl? And anyway, great story of just the two of us and how she helped kind of grow and shape my journey. But so signed up for all these nonprofit classes, created a nonprofit, started receiving donations, and next thing I knew, we had raised quite a bit of the money. And I graduated from SMU, and I don't think I'd even thought this far of, wait, I have to be the one to make sure this happens. Like, people just entrusted me with a lot of their money. Like, I've got to go over there to make sure this building works. So I convinced 3 friends to put their post-college jobs on hold, and we literally just moved to Uganda. We were 21, 22
now
years
you're
old.
21.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
my.
we had no idea what we were doing. Had to learn how to drive on, the other side of the road, and in between cows and chickens on these dirt roads. We lived in literally the most dangerous part of Kampala, and didn't know it. I mean, we just didn't know we didn't know. I had this tiny, it was sort of this concrete shack, and we had these 4 beds, and one of the guys we were with slept with a baseball bat under his bed because that was our form of security. Fishermen would catch us fish, and we'd eat it, and that was our start to this journey to build, this orphanage in Uganda.
Brittany, this is clearly you were born to do this work. Now it went, right?
Yeah, so we built it. And what's funny about, I feel like in some ways I was born to do this work, but in other ways I'm the least likely person.
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
Candidate to, so I mean, it grew me up as a person. I mean, and continues over the past 15 years. I feel like this work has, I've become, an adult through this work. I mean, I've been the women that we work with, and the communities that, I've spent my 20s and now my 30s, and I feel like they've shaped so much of how I see the world and others, and raised me in some ways. But yeah, so we finished the building in 2008, early 2009. I mean, made every mistake in the book. Just got pummeled in some ways. And a lot of, we joke now, a lot of our friends who've been working in Uganda for, 10, 15, 20 years will get together in Kampala, and everyone jokes after 1 or 2 glasses of wine, all the horrific stories of all the ways you've just totally screwed up that, no one else knows about come to the table. And somehow they, always center around projects like these. And we just, we got hammered. And so, I mean, to the point where...
What does hammered look like? What do you mean?
Lied to, cheated, stolen from, safety, our lives at one point, threats.
And you kept going.
Yeah, we kept going. And it was the most difficult 5 years of my life.
Why did you keep going? How did you keep going?
Just determination. Just thought I'm going to do, we said
Committed?
we're going to do this, and we're going to do it. And we're going to figure it out. And I think what I wasn't prepared for, though, was sort of, I knew we'd figure out how to build the building, and we did. It's one of the most beautiful buildings outside of Kampala. I mean, we did an excellent job with the building, but everything else around it that we couldn't control, So, we opened the building, and 2 months later, Sarah's husband, who had, sort of not been around in the past, saw money come through the door and an opportunity, and he came back and sort of took on this project. And he was not as good of a man as Sarah was a woman. And 2 months after we opened the building, he rented it out, didn't tell us, to a school to make money. And we found out. And this is a building that was supposed to be used for,
Yes,
orphan and
your
disadvantaged
building.
children. And it broke my heart. I mean, I'd spent 5 years of my 20s doing this. All my friends were in New York getting married, like having these great jobs. And I was in this village.
Overwhelmed in Uganda.
Figuring out how to build this orphanage home and then to feel so betrayed at such a young age and disillusioned. I mean, it hit me so hard. And it was the first time kind of that idealism that, in your early 20s when you do things like this, just burned out of you, and suddenly you're disillusioned and thinking, did I do more harm than help? Should I have come in the first place? Like, did I really hear like this voice that I was supposed to do that? Or did I make it up in my own mind, and even questions around, my faith in God and his role in this. Like, it just turned everything upside down. And I'll never forget, I went to one of my mentors in Uganda. He had worked there through Idi Amin for, 30, 40 years, and just this wise old man, and said, I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. Like, I feel like I've just, done more harm than help. And this whole thing's falling apart and I just want to go home. And he laughed, which wasn't what I wanted to hear at the time. And he just kind of chuckled and he said, that's what's wrong with you millennials. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you come and you have, all the idealism in the world and you're ready to, change the world. And something goes wrong and you leave and you quit and you don't go back. And he goes, he basically said, here's my challenge to you. You're 25 now. This was 10 years ago. And he said, what if you committed to this country? Imagine what you could do by the time you're 60 or you're 70 or 25. Now, look at all that you've learned in just,
look what you've
5
done.
years of working here. And he said, I challenge you to stay. And he said, I think probably the first 5 years you were here could have done more harm than help. But I bet the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years you spend in this country, you can learn from all the mistakes you made and create something wonderful. And I listened to him and I stayed, and that was the start of Akola.
That was a start. So describe Akola.
Yeah.
Now you're all over the world.
Yeah.
You have Akola jewelry,
Yeah.
which I love. I want you to talk about. So take us to now today.
Yeah.
Where are you in just 15 years?
Yeah, in 15 years, we've created a company that gets behind other women like Sarah who live in Uganda in these rural communities and can't meet the basic needs of their kids. They, can't feed the average of 10 dependents in their home, and we come behind women in those situations and create a job opportunity, an income generation opportunity so they can earn the money they need to care for their families themselves without an orphanage, without a building. Through their own efforts and hard work, they get to create a better life for kids.
Well, how did you get to what they're doing, which is creating this beautiful, I
jewelry.
think we've got pictures up of the
It's our horn
jewelry.
studio right there. Our Akola cow horn that we
Now, cow horn.
make into jewelry, and our raffia. I think you're seeing
So
that
beads,
here.
you've got beads, you've got bracelets, you've got...
We make jewelry and we sell it across the U.S.
And where are you selling it?
We're at Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Nordstrom. So
That's not shabby. That is not shabby.
It's great. Yeah, we're actually the first brand with impact at its core, kind of vertically empowering women through our supply chain that's retailing in all of these places, kind of the high-end retail. And it's been this amazing journey where, in 2007, 2008, when we were wrapping up the orphanage and, realizing like this model's tough, like it doesn't actually do what we thought it would do for these kids, what's a better way? And our goal was, if we can get income, what Sarah really needed when I first met her was income, right? She just needed the money to,
for
buy
beans.
School fees and food and make sure the kids could meet their basic needs. She didn't actually need an orphanage. She was capable of doing it herself, and just believing in the agency of women like that. And how do we get behind them? And we picked jewelry because it was the easiest way we thought we could get income into the hands of women who had no educational background, no training. They didn't own land. They were subsistence farmers. So, one bad harvest and, they're in debt to the local landholder and they're starving. So really tough crisis situations for women. And the thought was, how could they provide for their families? And we picked jewelry because it was easy to make, easy to ship, easy to train women.
Did you know how to
make
it?
I was not a jewelry expert. I had a friend from SMU, Elizabeth Phillips, who's here in Dallas, and she had a small jewelry business at SMU. And I called her up and just said, like, hey, we're trying to create this product over here. Can you come over for a couple months and help me figure out how to train the women to make jewelry and, to source the parts that we need to source to be competitive. And started with 15 women under a tree in Uganda in 2007. And by 2010, we had over 100 women in our program, and we made this decision that's completely set us apart as a jewelry brand, but also as a social enterprise. We became vertical. So in 2010, our product wasn't great. People were buying it because they wanted to get behind our mission, but we realized unless we create an amazing product that people would buy, whether or not they knew that it was bringing women and families out of poverty, like we've got to create an amazing product that sells, or this thing isn't going to work. Good. And we want to help more women. And so the only way we could do that is not only through the design, but through the quality. And to control the quality, we actually had to create a manufacturing business. We couldn't have women making jewelry under a tree or in the dirt because the quality of the product would reflect that. So we started investing in the infrastructure for economic opportunity, built training centers, workshops, manufacturing centers where women would go to work. And I mean, we knew how to build projects because we built the orphanage. So, we knew how to buy land and build a building, and started doing that and created this vertical manufacturing business that specifically employed women with an average of 10 dependents who they couldn't care for. And we trained them to make jewelry that now sells at Neiman Marcus and
that's incredible.
Beyond. Yeah.
Brittany. And so in the time we have left, I want the listeners to know about you personally.
Yeah.
So you have little kids.
Yeah.
Their names are, well, doesn't matter names, but how old are they?
I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, both boys. I work with all women, and I have all boys. Yeah.
What do you see for them in the future?
Yeah, this work has been my life's passion. I mean, I've given my entire self to this over the past 15 years, and it's not easy. I mean, to grow a business or grow a nonprofit, and we have both. Out of a rural village in Uganda, especially to export to the kind of places that we do, and just the relationships of the women, and those have changed my life. I mean, I know the women, their families, I know where their houses are. I lived beside them.
They're your family,
and I want the same for my kids. When they think about giving back, I don't want them to think about service projects where they for one time go and they do something for someone else and then leave. I want them to think about relationships and just getting to know, communities and people that are so different than they are, knowing that will shape their life and their character and their heart as much as, they can give back, as well. It's a reciprocal relationship. And I want them to be a part of that. And I hope that, I've been talking to my husband for years about how, when can I take him to Uganda? What age is right? And can we spend summers there? Because I want them to form relationships like I have with the communities that I've been able to get to know and love over the years, and then have their life changed as a result.
You are a bright, shining star. And as I said earlier, I don't know any other organization and entrepreneur that has had a similar story. If you know one, you can let me know. But I just was so thrilled that you would take the time to come on the show, because what I do know about you is you are uber busy and you're being a mom and you're prioritizing that.
Yeah.
And I do want to ask before you go, Brittany, you've learned so much. The thing that I hear so deeply from the heart, your heart, is that commitment.
Yeah.
What are some of the maybe 2 or 3 lessons learned as a young entrepreneur
Yep.
who stayed the course.
Yep.
Obviously, perseverance. But what else? What else?
I mean, I think it's the courage, the courage to keep on going, and the ability to fail and get back up and just make your model better. I mean, we failed our way to success. I mean, we've done so many things wrong that finally we got it right, and we stuck to it. We didn't give up.
To it.
And I mean, there's so many times where I should have and could have given up, and I didn't. And I think that is what has differentiated our business from many others that I know, is we never gave up, and we kept on going, and didn't look at failure as a stopping block, just looked at it as a way to learn and to grow. And I think as a result built something really exciting. I mean, a world-class jewelry brand that empowers women in crisis.
It's beautiful. If I encourage all of you to take a look at the Akola jewelry. There's one more thing that you said you have to repeat on air about delegation, because that's something we all need, Brittany.
I'm learning in this season of life. I've 2 young kids, and Akola's been my heart and soul for 15 years. I've given everything to it, and I can't do that. When you have kids, you can't give everything to something else and nothing to them. And I think I've learned, in this season of life, I don't do anything that someone else can do on our team. My litmus test for what I say yes to is, if no one else can do it and I'm uniquely designed to, then I will take it on. But if anyone else can do it, they should.
Boy, and
they do.
Is that a lesson? If anyone else, I mean, when you said that to me, it went, because there's many of us that think we have to do it all, and we don't. And you can't. And you can't. You just can't.
And then you'll do something amazing in the world, but neglect your children in the process.
Not right.
And I've seen others do that, and I don't want to do it.
No, you don't.
So,
Brittany, thank you so much. And you have to put your hair back just at least to let them see that beautiful
horn.
And that's made from horn.
Akola cow horn. Yeah, it's one of our incredible. Our women hand carve it. So
I'm going to go look for that for sure. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I want you to know that you can go to Akola, Akola, project.org to learn more about the business and the jewelry and all of that. But you've heard some wonderful stories, the real stories, the woman behind all of this. And it's a multi-million-dollar project now.
Yeah, it's exciting, growing
15
business.
years.
Yep.
That's pretty incredible. And incredible because, again, you have been given the gift and the urge, and you said it, my words, not yours, but you couldn't let that voice go.
Yeah.
And sometimes we know that.
Yeah.
Pay attention to our inner self. So thank you for watching. You know what? I know that you are busy out there and you listen to a lot of podcasts, you watch a lot of YouTubes, and I just want you to know that I really do appreciate the fact that you tune in. Want you to next week too, when we will have our first sponsored show from the Dallas Regional Chamber, and a young man from Pakistan with an inspiring story. They're all inspiring, right? Who came to the United States with nothing, Brittany, and he rode a bicycle to work. He finally got a job. I won't tell you where, but you tune in. You're going to hear a story of a young man who's now a vice president. Really a cool story. So until then, you just stay authentic. Keep yourself moving forward, no matter what it is, one step at a time, and never give up. Ever, ever, ever. Thanks so much. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, valerieandcompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.